What is up, everybody? Eddie Barco here once again, and thank you for joining me for another very cool episode of the Nebula Music Podcast. Today, I am very excited. I say that a lot, but that's only because I have the coolest, dopest people on the show that are just doing fantastic things. And every time I get the opportunity to talk to someone who I believe is breaking ground, is doing cool things, is a phenomenal musician, or a triple threat as a person who I'm about to introduce, I get very excited. So I have Miss Luna Ora joining me for a very cool conversation today. Luna, how are you today?
I am doing well. Thank you. What an introduction.
I do my best to give the best possible introductions because hey,
I love
if
it.
you're doing something cool, man, then you deserve the best possible introduction. And I
Oh,
honestly, I've looked into what you've done, and you do some really cool shit, man. And I am just stoked to dive into what it is that you do. But let me start off by saying this. How are you currently doing with the whole, shutdown and everything? I know that things aren't technically necessarily shut down. You're out in LA, right where I'm at too. So things are like half open, I would say. But I'm curious, how have you been dealing with the whole pandemic and the entertainment industry pretty much being shut down?
yeah, it's interesting because I can't play shows, obviously, right now. Venues are still closed off, unfortunately, but I'm still able to, write a lot. I do a lot of writing for sync, so for television and film and all of that as well. So I have like multiple projects going on at the same time. So I've actually been staying busy, which I'm happy about. I'm thankful for, considering, I have friends that cannot say the same thing. It's
Right.
an unfortunate time for a lot of people, but yeah, I mean, I've been fortunate enough to be able to stay busy and keep my calendar full. So
Yeah. Can I ask? I'm not sure if we're allowed to know, but what are some of the sync licenses that you're working on? Is it mostly for commercial shows, movies?
yeah, so yes, and advertisements as well. I can't really say right now because there's a few that are kind of in the process of
Right.
going through, but I have a couple big ones coming up that I'm really excited about.
Oh, I'm so happy for you. Sync is it's a huge opportunity when you get your music in the right sync license. That can make all the difference, especially in when you're up and coming or when you already even have a name for yourself and you get that right sync license. Not only is the money pretty good, but the recognition for that is fantastic. If you don't mind me asking, how long have you been doing sync licenses? And by that I mean like writing songs specifically for commercials or placements and all that. Have you been doing it for very long?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of my music I've written throughout the years has just kind of fallen into that category. The EP that I'm about to release, the songs are really, they're very I guess I could say that they're perfect, for commercials or movies,
Oh
they're very
yeah.
theatrical, cinematic at times. So since I started writing that music a couple years ago, we've been pitching those songs, but I just started last year two separate side projects that are specifically for sync.
Mm.
One being like a very out of the box, sort of like hip hop influenced, like alternative pop project, and then
Ooh.
another one being like a rock project that aligns a little bit more with like the Naked and Famous or M83.
Those
Um,
classic 2000 like early 2000s 2010 bands. I love the Naked and
yes,
Famous.
yeah, exactly. So I have all of that music like ready to go, ready to come out, but it's been pushed through sync, and I've been lucky enough to land a few things. So
I
yeah,
love it. I love it. You're definitely playing it smart. Those are some really good bands to take influence from. Like, it's one of those things where I mean, the Naked and Famous are still around. M83, I don't think they've done anything in a while, but those are bands that when they put out music, it's like very unique and it sticks, and to take influence from people like that, that's pretty smart, you know?
oh yeah, yeah. I mean, and it's interesting too because the people I work with, we just kind of sat in a room and we're thinking, what is our sound? What are we trying to go for? And we didn't really come to an answer until the songs were already done, and then we're like, oh, this does kind of sound like this, or it fits in that vein. If we were to think of people that we would tour with, it would fit in that vein of artists, which I am really excited about because I do love those bands, and it's nice to be able to make something that's just a side project, but have it be just as cool as something that I'm doing, for
Yeah.
Lunora.
Yeah, I love it. Well, Luna, just to kind of get some things started here, I want to know a little bit about maybe where you're from. I know you're not from LA, but I'd like to know a little bit about maybe how, where you grew up and how you got started in music, and, we'll just kind of go from there.
Yeah, of course. I grew up in Arizona, in the East Valley, and I started singing when I was really young. I would say probably before the age of 5. And I started writing music at the age of 10
Ooh,
and going out and performing around 13, 14.
wow. So very young.
Yes.
You pretty much started right off the back. Once you could understand what you were writing, you just decided just to go for
Yeah. I think I wanted to be like Hannah Montana or something.
it.
I was just like watching way too much Disney Channel. I was like, I could do that. And I
Did you
I
have
mean,
two wigs?
I had the gift. Yeah, exactly. No, I wear more wigs now than I did back then. Um um I don't know. I had this talent that I was really excited about, and it was something that was noticed, early on in my life, and I wanted to, I wanted to do something with it, and I would see all these like young Disney Channel stars and like Nickelodeon stars like working, and I wanted that. That was something that I wanted when I was a lot younger. So that's kind of what I was chasing, was that sort of adolescent like stardom that exists in your head, before you
Mm.
actually get into the music industry and realize like, okay, this isn't what I thought it was. It's just like a business, just like anything else is a business.
Yeah.
It's just when I write music now, like that's just my job, which is really exciting.
Yeah.
Um
As far as jobs go, it's probably one of the best jobs you can have.
Yeah, and I'm lucky enough to say that I it's officially, a job to me. It's grown into a career that's been lucrative enough for me to be able to pay my bills, and that's all I've ever really wanted. So being here is a really big deal for me.
Yeah. Can I ask you something? When you first started writing songs, age of 10, I feel like when it comes to artists and songwriters, depending on who you talk to, the time where people start writing to when they start performing can be vastly different. Some people wait decades, some people do it almost instantly. You started relatively young. I mean, performing at age 14, while it's not necessarily like super rare per se, but it seems like you definitely went for it with that mindset, like you said, like you wanted it and you started doing it. Was I guess what I'm curious about is, was there a support system behind you? Did you just decide, hey, I'm gonna figure this out? Was it just for fun when you started it, or did you really have it in mind, like, oh, Hannah Montana, I want that life. Like I'm gonna do whatever I possibly can, or somewhere in between. I don't know, but I'm curious about that.
No, it was definitely like the Hannah Montana thing. Like I was like, I could do that. Why not? And I had a mom and I had parents that were very supportive. We didn't grow up with a lot of money, but one thing my parents made sure to always do was, if they were going to stretch thin, they were going to stretch thin on the things that were important to us. So, music equipment, guitars, anything that was going to keep me doing something that I loved and something that I was really good at, they would spend money on, even, when they didn't have it. So I was very much supported as a kid, and my mom worked as like a manager for me when I was a
Mm.
lot younger, until I got to a point to where I was an adult and I could, I found a manager that actually worked within the industry and shifted gears there. But yeah, no, I had an amazing support system, and I had a lot of friends that were really supportive of it. So it was never in my mind. It was never something that wasn't possible for me.
Mm.
So when I went for it, I really went for it.
Interesting. Here's the thing. I feel like, again, everyone's story is very different, and this is the part that really makes me curious, because I feel like once you get to a certain point in your career, a lot of stories tend to converge. Like once you get successful enough, you kind of tend to do similar things to other people, but to get to that point where they converge is vastly different, no matter who you talk to. And I always find it fascinating to learn about either challenges or how someone developed in their early life, because ultimately that decides, the kind of choices they made. For you, right off the back, within like 10 minutes, I already know you never thought you couldn't do it, which again is fantastic. But that's not always the case. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I am just genuinely curious, where do you think that mentality came from? Was it because you had a very supportive family? Was it the environment you were in? Maybe you just were always like that by yourself. I don't know, but I'm curious. Like, do you know where you got that feeling like, you know what, I can do this? you know?
I just I've never been the type of person that said that I couldn't do something. Like I was always the type of person that I would hear someone tell me I can't do something and then I do it just to prove them wrong, you know?
Mm.
I have that sort of energy,
It's
and
that
I think
fire energy. I'm not sure if
yeah,
you're
like
fire.
I would look at myself in the mirror at a young age and be like, "You can do this. Like, don't let anything stop you from doing it." And then on top of it, I had these parents that were just like, "If this is what you want, all you need to do is work at it and be persistent." Now, I haven't always felt that way. You know, I'm now 28, so that's a long time from starting to perform at 14.
Yeah.
And I've been through all sorts of ups and downs. There was a point in my early 20s where I wanted to quit because we live in a ageist world and an ageist industry, you know.
Mm. Yep.
And so I felt like at 23, 24, if I wasn't already the biggest thing in the world, that I was washed up. And so there was a point in time where I was like, I'm sick of writing what I'm writing, doing what I'm doing. I don't feel like I'm being true to myself. I feel like I'm tracing, someone else's story. And that's when I took a break, and I really felt like quitting for the longest time. And that was when I started walking into sessions with this like attitude and this sort of rage, and was able to write the new music that I am now releasing that is far more who I am than any other music I've ever made. So it goes to show that you can have that fire inside of you and still have instances in your life and have to live through circumstances that are trying to stifle that fire, but you just have to be persistent and keep pushing through and just stay true to yourself, and at the end of the day you're always going to come to a winning conclusion.
Yeah. And it's one of those things where it makes sense when you're looking back at it. Like everything you're saying, I 100% agree. And there's millions of cliche phrases that talk about this kind of attitude, the ability to understand how to use that fire and that energy and look back at something and figure out how like the path led you to where you're currently at and using that and all of that. What I'm curious about is, what it's very clear to me that it's working for you. Looking at your music and who you are as a person, like you've embraced that energy. And some could even argue that maybe without those obstacles, you might not have become who you were supposed to be. What were you writing before you decided to call it or take a break?
I was writing pop music, and pop music is interesting. When you say pop, it's if you were to think of pop music today, it's basically rap. I mean, rap is pop music.
Yeah.
So pop music is just whatever's popular at the time. But at the time that I was writing it, I was living in like a Max Martin, Dr. Luke world that was very much like Katy Perry,
Yep.
and Kesha, and all of these artists that Lady Gaga and Taylor Swift. So I was working in that world, and the industry was so different at that time, because when you were walking in sessions, you were walking in sessions to write a hit, and that was
Yeah.
everyone's intention. It didn't matter what room you were walking into, because that's just what the industry looked like. And I felt like it was so vapid and so lifeless, and it didn't make me love what I was doing. And on top of it, I think I was also trying to chase something that wasn't mine to chase. It was like I was
Mm.
chasing someone else's story. I was going to be the next Katy Perry or the next Taylor Swift, or different renditions of the people that have already come before me. And I didn't feel like that was going to do anything for me, whether that be fulfillment as a songwriter and as an artist, or anything for my career, because you never succeed trying to chase someone else's story.
Yeah.
You
Very
can a
true.
little bit, but it's only going to last so long. So I wanted something that was going to be mine, that was going to fulfill a niche that no one else could fill, because it was me and only me that could do it. And so that's kind of where all of this new music came from.
Wow. I love that you're saying that because it's absolutely true. Can I ask you, where did that revelation come from? Or how did it, I guess, how did it become what you felt you needed to do? Because one thing you said earlier, which is absolutely true, and I hear it way too often, and it's absolutely wrong, is that whole idea that if you're not like a mega pop star by like 23 or 24 or whatever, then what are you doing? Stop chasing that dream, because it's, unfortunately, a lot of the pop stars you do see are relatively younger, and if they're older, it's because they've been there for a while. But that is definitely something that I hear quite a bit, and it isn't true. And unfortunately, in my experience, I have witnessed many people that unfortunately gets stuck in that mindset, and it's a really hard mindset to break out of when you're kind of stuck. It's almost like tar because everyone else around you is saying it, and so you kind of end up by default feeling it. How did you realize or learn that, you know what, this isn't me, and it's okay that it's not me, and I'm just going to find whatever is me, and I'm going to go do that? Because it's very clear that you're comfortable with that. And I'm wondering if that was always the case when you started, working professionally, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I just sort of let go of the machine that was the music industry in my head. I always compare it to like the Wizard of Oz when you pull the curtain and you realize that at the end of the day, it's just a business.
Mm.
And if you see yourself as a business, which I do, I see myself as a business and I see the work that I create as my product. And I see, who I am as an artist and my brand and all of that as a product. And the whole point is just to reach my fan base. And it's not about reaching everybody. It's just about reaching the right people, the people that want to hear what comes from me
Mm.
and from like my honest self, and not necessarily going out and trying to make everybody happy because it's just never going to work. And so for me, I was like super fed up, was starting to sort of write sync music. I was writing for a company that would send me briefs, which were basically like, oh, we need something that sounds like the chain smokers, or we need something that sounds like that for this commercial or for this, TV show or whatever. And I was even like fed up with that. I was like, I'm tired of walking into a room and being fraudulent, you know?
Mm.
And I I remember specifically it was one day I walked in the room and I was like, we are not gonna write to brief. We're just gonna write something. Like just humor me. Let's just write something fun and cool. And I told the producer to pick up the bass and he started playing it and he kind of hit one note that I really loved and I was just like, hold that note. Just like play that one note. He's like, one note all the way through? I'm like, yeah, just play that one note all the way through. And then we built this really cool, almost like industrial um, Nine Inch Nails like meets Rage Against the Machine
Oh,
type
what?
of song.
That's
And
sick.
then right, I know, and I it came from nowhere. I had those influences, but it wasn't in my head that I was like, oh, we're gonna write, a Nine Inch Nails song today. It just sort of came out that way and reminded us of that. And I thought that that was so cool and so interesting that we had nothing in our line of sight for like what we were trying to attack, but it just sort of came out that way. And when I got on the mic, it was like the first time that I felt like, holy, like, can I cuss?
Absolutely. Go for it.
Okay.
Holy
I always have
shit.
to ask, but I was like, holy shit, like this feels so good. Like it feels so good how I'm screaming, the words I'm saying, like it just all felt so right. And it was in that moment that I realized like this is my sound. This is what I've been meaning to make my entire life and I've just been too scared to because I have this box that I need to live in as a young female working in this industry, I'm I am a young, attractive female, and that's all they really see. So for me, they need to put me in this box that is like this nice, pretty, petite, quiet. I can sing really well. So just, lean on that, rest on my laurels. And that's not what I wanted. I wanted to be something so much more powerful than that. And that was the moment that I realized, that this is when everything is going to change for me.
I love that. You know what's funny is I feel like those moments, right? The moments where everyone talks about how, this moment is what helped me realize that I was different and that I needed to go this path or whatever. I do feel like it is something that many of us chase, and it's not something that you can really like. I don't know how to describe it, but I feel like it's not something that can really manifest just by doing a formula. Like it's one of those things that hits you out of nowhere, and you as an individual have to like be aware that it's hitting you and recognize that, oh shit, this is where I should take my path, because it takes fucking courage to feel that aggressiveness or whatever the example would be. But in your case, it's that aggressiveness, that feeling that you got, that hey, this is my sound, and to really embrace it in an industry where probably at the time that sound that you felt was really you was probably not the best that you could sell. You know what I mean? Like, and as someone that, like you, who's been in the industry, who knows about this, like, and it is very common where whatever's popular, everyone tries to do that because it's what's going to sell, and some people make some
Right.
money. But then all of a sudden, you get thousands of people doing the exact same thing, and it's fucking boring. But I honestly would argue that it's hard to break away from that. Like, what do you do when everybody is buying the pop sound and you're trying to do something else? Well, what else can you do? But you felt it. Like, you allowed yourself to like find that sound, and I loved that you embraced it. You just went for it. So what happened after that then? You found your sound, you were aggressive about it, and you were like, holy shit, this is me. Did you like immediately dive into that sound? Did you wait a little bit? Like, what happened?
Yeah, I mean, that was the point where I loved the sound so much and I loved the song that we made so much. So I was like, send this to everyone. I told my manager, like, you need to send this to everyone. We need to reach out to producers that are going to be able to produce stuff like this. Because at the time I was working with someone that, was not as open minded.
Mm,
And that's another thing that I ran into a lot was that I was working with producers that were very close-minded and in the hit sense where you walk into a room and it's like we got to write something that's going to make us a bunch of money, which I totally understand. I get it because people need to pay their bills, they got to keep food on the table. But at the end of the day, for me it was always in my head like it that you you can pay the bills, for a month writing in one way, with the intent of making a hit that's like hot right now in this very moment, or you can make like the big money doing it the right way, which is creating your own path that people can attach themselves to and be like, oh, I want to be a part of this. Because no one wants to be a part of the thing that's already been happening.
right.
It's already old and dead. By the time it's cool, it's already done. We want to be like Billie Eilish, for example, who came out and sounded like absolutely no one else. And look at the type of career she's been able to make for herself. And
Yep.
for me, I've always known that in my heart of hearts that I have the potential to be something like that. Whether I get there or not, I don't really care. I just kind of I let life take me as it will. But that's the type of career I wanted. And so when I told my manager, I'm like, we're just going for it. Like I just don't care. We're going for it. This is what it's gonna be. And then we ended up with that one song, we ended up getting connected with JT Daly, who was the producer on the EP that I'm releasing in October. And he did the K Flay EP. He's done Paris. He his recent thing with Paris was Hallucinations, which if you listen to it, I mean, his work is unmatched in my opinion. Like he is just a phenomenal producer. So to be able to get people like him really excited and to just come and work with me as this artist that had no budget, had nothing to offer him, he saw how special it was. And because I chose to follow my own path, I ran into someone like him and I was able to create the EP that I have today, which is now opening so many more doors for me to work with, you know, so many other producers. And it's now labels are looking at me, with their eyebrows up a little bit. And I'm just like, don't you think? Like, don't even think about it. Like, it's not happening.
I mean, that's a good sign, though. It's a sign that you're on the right path, though.
Yeah, it's a sign that I am definitely on the right path, and it's something that I'm going to keep doing, and I'm going to make it work for me, and whatever way that looks like, whether that means I go with a label deal or whatever. I right now at this point in time am not interested in something like that.
How
I'm more
come?
interested in seeing where I can take this by myself.
Ooh,
Because like if it's working, then it's working. And if
yeah.
the labels don't pick up anybody anymore unless it's working for them.
Yep.
It's just what it is. It's the laziness of the music industry nowadays. You see memes all the time where it's like an A&R guy at an In and Out like ordering an artist off the menu that like already has a following and like a large you know what I mean, a large fan base, and like that's what it is now. They just pick up people that have already done all the hard work so that they don't have to do it. They're not developing artists anymore. So
Yeah.
for me, what that means to me is that I'm not going to sign a deal right now with anybody until I get to the point to where the conversation is turned and it's more of a discussion about a partnership as opposed to them making me a deal.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
Because
know,
then
you know
you
what I
have the
mean?
leverage right there.
Absolutely. And if they're already interested in what I'm doing, then that means that I'm doing something cool, which means that I have the potential of taking it somewhere big by myself.
Yeah. I love your attitude, Luna. Like I am it's infectious, if I gotta say. Like, I gotta say that it's a
Yep.
very infectious attitude, and you're absolutely doing it right. And it's a shame that the industry is like that. I completely agree. I have known many A&R people, and no disrespect to any of them, but on average, I 100% agree. There are a few outliers out there that do their best to bring very fresh
Absolutely,
things,
yeah.
but I would say that on average, I agree with you. I do feel like the world of A&R probably died in the 90s or maybe even earlier than that. But yeah, you're right. It's basically just buying stuff that someone already else made. I don't even know. That's like another
It's
can of
just, I mean,
worms.
it's good business for them, if they have to put less money into it, it makes sense. At the end of the day, I look at it, I'm not mad about it. That's just how it is. It's the same thing with streaming. You can't be mad about the fact that streaming is a thing. It's just how it is now.
Mm,
And you just have to adapt to that. I think that's what's so important for younger artists and artists that are just now getting into the industry. What they need to understand is that the game is completely changed. It is
yeah.
not the industry that you knew before, where you sign a deal with a record label and all your dreams come true. It's
No.
just not that anymore. You have to put so much more work into it, but it's so much more worth it, because at the end of the day, you get to keep everything that you create. And I think that is the number one thing for an artist, is to make sure that they're not giving away their rights to the art that they make,
Yeah.
and to keep it as close to their chest as long as possible.
Yeah. You know, what's interesting about that, about keeping it close to your chest as long as possible, it's the idea that while you can do that, I do feel like, well, here's what I see, and I could be wrong, so you can feel free to correct me at any point, but here's what I've observed from all the music and stuff that we get and submissions and all that, is that while most people are advocating for keeping things for yourself, that pool has grown exponentially. So now everybody, and I mean that, like, so many people have access to professional quality or semi-professional quality, and it, even though there is like that opportunity to do it for yourself, now everybody also has that opportunity. And how do you
Right.
stand out? Now, obviously, you, Luna, your story, as we've clearly have explored, you are standing out because you have embraced this identity, and this identity that one could argue has always been there. But how does somebody, find that identity? I feel like that is that struggle that a lot of independent artists always face, because once you start doing it on your own, it's good and you feel great. But then once you have to start paying those bills, then you start getting, that choice of having to make music to make some money or just stick to yourself. And that's where I don't know, that's where it's a little difficult for some independent artists.
Right. Yeah, no, and I completely understand that. But you could look at the flip side of the coin as well, and see that, things like Spotify, although there are millions and millions of artists on there that people can choose from, all you need to do is find the 100,000 that love you. You know,
Yeah.
you have the entire internet and the capability. It's even, like I've studied how to do, marketing, like social media marketing, and doing all of that, because I want to know how to get to the people that love my music, and how to build authentic relationships with them. Because if I build those authentic relationships with them, then they'll always be a fan of me. And I just need to keep adding those people on, onto, like, into my book. And over time, those people will come to shows and buy merch. And, then it's like this cyclical thing. It's not like you're just kind of like shooting a shotgun out there. You're really targeting the people that care about you, and you don't need that many people to care about you to be successful at this.
Right.
And you have the option of doing that. You just have to put a little bit of extra work into it. But one thing is for sure, as far as finding your own fan base, I mean, people can smell bullshit from a mile away.
Yep.
I know everyone in this industry walks around and they're just like, "Oh, it's what people love," and they talk about people like they're simple-minded, and I don't think they are. I think that people that love music are highly intelligent, and they can tell when you're doing something that is fraudulent. They can tell when you're doing something just to make a buck off of them, you know?
Mm.
And I think it's so important to find the things that make you special, and find the things that make you different, and then just lean all the way on those things. because those are going to be the things that people are going to be able to identify and be like, oh, like for example, Hobo Johnson.
Yeah.
Hobo Johnson is like, what even type of music is that? He just went for it. Just this spoken word, weird, quirky, funny, and he just leaned on it. And look at how big he got in the amount of time that he was doing music and put all this music out. I mean, he just exploded because people love that type of authenticity. And that authenticity exists in everyone. It's just whether or not they're too scared to go against the status quo.
Mm. And so that doesn't scare you then? Based on what
No.
I'm hearing, you've never been scared by that.
No, I definitely was scared of that for a long time, up until the point to where I just was like, "This is stupid." Like I'm done. I'm done playing the game. I met so many industry people and like A&Rs and not and I don't think that all A&Rs are bad by
Right.
any means. I do think that there are people out there that do truly care about developing artists, but uh I've been through the ringer and I know what it looks like and I know what it sounds like to sit across the table from, an old white dude and like have him tell me what's cool. And I'm just like, you don't know what's cool. Like, so it's like, it's, you either listen to everybody else and fall in line or you listen to yourself and create your own destiny.
Yeah. I love that. And I love how open-minded you are. Here's the thing, like this is just kind of what I'm gauging based on what we're talking about. I do feel like a lot of your insight and wisdom does come from your experience. Like I wonder if you would have the same opinion, 8, 9 years ago. Well, obviously not because we've talked about it, but
Oh God, no.
right, like it's one of those things where because you've lived it, because you've kind of been in it, you've experienced many things that the industry has to offer.
Hmm.
You essentially learned from it, became wise, and chose yourself over it. But again, I've witnessed many people who are older than you who've been in the industry just as long, and obviously a little longer because they're older, who have not changed. And fine, like to each their own, right? I'm always advocating for you do you, But whenever I find someone like you who's, I don't know, who pushes past those boundaries and who knows themselves and always bets on themselves, it's way too rare, and that's scary. That it's way too rare for there to be people like you. And I'm not saying that just to like compliment you. Like I'm genuinely excited to get to explore why it is you think the way you do, and it's refreshing and it kind of gives me, I don't want to say hope, so to speak, because I'm not I don't know. But my idea, I'm kind of rambling here, but my idea is I love what you're doing. And here's actually something that I'm curious about, and I'm hoping that it's okay for me to ask. But you did say something a little earlier that piqued my curiosity a little bit, and it's something that I don't know anything about, and I'm hoping you can kind of educate me a little bit. You mentioned earlier how being a woman as a songwriter and being in this industry, how there's very specific um, expectations for you. I guess we can leave it like that. I'm
Hmm.
curious, since you've made that realization, since you started in the music industry, have those expectations changed at all?
You mean other people's expectations of me?
Yeah, because when I look at your music and I look at what you're doing, you are like your own person. You are kind of creating your own music and you're just doing whatever the fuck you want, and that's
Hmm.
fantastic. And people like you, in my opinion, that's kind of what causes change. But I'm wondering if those feelings that you felt a couple years ago, where like you felt like if you were going to be successful in the industry, you needed to be in a box, you needed to be like well put together, like the industry needed you to be a certain way. I'm wondering since then, do you feel like things are changing for the better, or are they still very much the same?
Yeah, I mean, I do think that the industry is changing slightly as far as how it views women. I don't think it's changing enough or fast enough. But I am like a huge proponent of, you cannot control how anyone else behaves. You can only control how you react to it.
Mm,
So as far as that goes, like I just demand respect from people. When I walk into a session, I just demand to be treated exactly the same as anyone else that walks into a room. Um, any other, male that walks into a room that works, especially, in my genre in rock and in alternative, there's not a whole lot of female representation. So when I'm walking in a room, I'm walking in a room to be like, don't fuck with me. You know what I mean?
yeah.
with just that type of energy. So I think because I exude that type of energy now when I'm walking into a room, whether that be a meeting or a session or an interview or anything else, I exude that energy, and it almost kind of tells people to like this is what to expect from me. You like don't expect anything from me. This is just how it's coming. You know.
Yeah. Do you ever?
But that's also like what my project is about too. Like I was writing this EP at a time that I was ridding myself of all of those, gender conditioning things that were happening to me when I was younger because I grew up with a religious background. I grew up in the Mormon Church,
Oh
and
wow.
that was sort of uh, what created this identity crisis for me as a female, and why I sort of blossomed a lot later in life was because I had these things that were kind of holding me back, um, I guess this like shame and this guilt that existed in my mind from those days that I had to sort of rid myself of, and that's what this EP really is about. And so with that, comes the shift in who I am as a person and also how I behave in situations within the industry.
Interesting. That's you know what, I don't think I've ever interviewed a Mormon or someone who grew up in the Mormon Church before. If you don't mind me asking,
Yeah.
because again, I'm here to learn and I want to grow as much as I possibly can, and someone like you obviously always will help me grow and learn from things in the Mormon Church. And we don't have to get into this, but I'm generally curious. You did mention how because of the way you grew up and you had these things that you thought about or that you felt like when you were in the music industry are as a woman in the Mormon church, is that looked down upon to like pursue music or to do stuff like that? I'm a little confused if you don't mind
Um,
explaining.
yeah, no, not to pursue music. I think just the lifestyle that existed within the church was what was causing me to have this identity crisis because, in the Mormon church, the way that women are viewed is just like how anyone else, or any other female is viewed in any other religion.
Mm.
It's very much like you're the
You have to be the
homemaker.
docile one, right?
Yes, you're quiet, you're kind, you're gracious, you don't take up too much space, you get married and have children and take care of the home. And it was all of that that I was told was the extent of my existence. And I think
Mm.
that stifled my my growth as a woman and as an independent woman because I had that, like what we were talking about earlier, I had that fire inside of me that told
Mm.
me like I could do anything that I wanted to do, but at the same time I was attending a church and sort of had these people in my ear telling me like this is the extent of your existence, like this is what God wants you to do,
Yeah.
and so with that, it took me a long time to rid myself of that conditioning and to rid myself of all of those negative things that existed in the back of my mind that I didn't even realize were still there until I addressed them.
Yeah.
Um,
That's
yeah.
crazy. Do you still consider yourself a Mormon or have you separated completely?
I wouldn't consider myself a Mormon, no. And when I was attending church and everything that I've learned in the Mormon church, it has made me 100% the person that I am today. It has made me, it has given me integrity. It's the reason why I love to help people. There's nothing that I've learned in that church that has been negative besides my role as a female and where I fit in the world and in society. That's the only thing that I would say would be the one thing that negatively impacted me. But everything else, I love the teachings. They're all amazing people. If you meet a Mormon, like they would literally give you the shirt off of their back.
That's true.
Like they are
That's true.
they're truly the nicest people in the world, and it's because that's what they're taught. They're taught to be giving and loving and to be non-judgmental, and I love that. I love all of those teachings. I just could not subscribe to the lifestyle because I felt like I was being once again put into a box and labeled as something, and that it and being labeled as something doesn't allow you to live beyond those walls, and I didn't like that, you know.
Yeah. But see, here's the thing that I'm always taking away from your responses is that you just always chose yourself in that sense. And here's where I relate to you a little bit. I don't normally like to hijack the conversation, but I grew up very religious too. I wasn't Mormon, but I was Pentecostalist. I'm
Mm.
Hispanic, and Hispanics are notoriously known for, if they're gonna be
I'm
Christian.
Hispanic too.
Hey, look at
What's
that!
up?
I'm Guatemalan. What nationality are you?
Mexican.
Mexican. Hey, it's okay. We're neighbors. We're kind of neighbors. But so like I grew up Pentecostalist, right? And I witnessed firsthand how, at least in the Hispanic Pentecostalist community, I can't say about anybody else, but how much women are, like you said, not trained, but it's kind of like conditioning. I guess that's the best way to say it. How like
Mhm.
the men are the one who are the leaders. They're the ones who are the pastors, so to speak. They're the ones who kind of make the rules, and the women, while they're free to kind of go about their day, they're still like they're there to serve their husband. And I hate to say it like that, but that's what I took away growing up, 18 years in that world until I went off on my own. And it's crazy how much that can stay with you for a long time. Like, and
Mhm.
everybody that I've talked to from those days, many of them I'm happy to say, have kind of grown up to be great adults, and they've, kind of created their own lives. But it's funny how in every single one of those people's stories, there was a period of time of a couple of years where there was so much doubt in their mind because of the way that they grew up, because they felt, and I'm talking about specifically women here, because they grew up in this environment where they were going to serve, so to speak, for their lives. And now that they're adults and they're kind of in the world and they're trying to figure it out, it creates this weird imbalance where you have to figure out how to break away from that and create your own path. And it seems that to some extent you might have gone through something like that. I'm not sure.
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah. No, I definitely, and I always attribute my career in music, um, like the everything that I've done in music has fixed me in a way. Has always been like the uh, what's the word I'm looking for? The medicine, so to speak, for all of the issues that I had growing up, because it music allowed me this opportunity to step outside of my little bubble, like, my little Mormon bubble with all my friends, that were just like me, and believed in all the same things as me. And it offered me an opportunity to step out of that bubble and work within the music industry with a bunch of different people from all different walks of life. And so it saved me in that sense because it allowed me to see the other side of the coin, and the other side of the world.
Yeah.
And as I got older, and I ridded myself of all of those kind of, that stereotype bullshit that exists in the music industry for young females. I was starting to realize, when I was having those types of conversations with myself, I started to realize, like, wow, this not only reaches my career and me as an artist, but there's something deeper inside of me that needs to change. Because there are these people that they'll, in sly ways, find ways to kind of manipulate you and kind of make you fit into this box. But at the same time, there's also this thing that exists inside of you that consists of shame, and
Yeah.
is keeping you in that box, because you don't have to get in the box. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
you still physically have to, like, move your own body into that box. Like, and there were things that were existing inside of me where I had been told, like, what is okay and what isn't okay for a female to do growing up, and that bled into my career in the music industry. So when I
Mm.
ridded myself of that on the industry side, I started to realize that I was ridding myself of that just in my life.
Yeah. Can I ask you that shame that you talk about? And again, we don't have to. I don't know. I don't ever feel like I'm qualified to talk about this, but I'm genuinely curious and I want to learn. I'm being honest. That shame that the industry implements, is that like a very literal shame that you're talking about, or is that something that you just feel, like being in the room in a session or performing or whatever, being around industry people? You just feel it?
Yeah, I don't think anyone can make you feel anything. You feel what you feel because you choose to feel that way. I really do. I feel that way. Obviously, not in the literal sense. Like, if someone does something that makes you sad, then they make you sad. But like, there are things that exist within us, I think, that we need to face. Um, like, so I felt shame because of of how I grew up and the things that I was told. So there's just this little nagging thing in the back of my head that's like, yeah, but like you can't do that, remember? Because so and so said years ago
Yep.
that, so it's just that stuff that sticks with you. And it's the same thing with like sexuality and all of that stuff. Um, things that like if you grow up in a really religious background, like it completely contorts your view of sexuality and what that means. And and so I had a hard time with that, coming out of that. And there's songs on this EP that, or there's one song in particular that's about that, and like kind of coming into my own and realizing like, no, I own my own body. Like I don't need to feel shame for being a sexual being. But
Yeah.
I had felt shame for a long time, whether that be shame from my parents being like, oh, you're not married yet, or just the shame of knowing that like, oh, God is not going to love me as much because I chose, to be just a normal human being and do normal human things.
Wow.
So it's all of that kind of stuff that I'm talking about when I talk about shame. Um, and really what it is it's just people telling you that you can't do something when you're young and it sticks with you. And then when you're an adult and you can make your own decisions and you start making your own decisions
It
based on
clashes.
what you want, yeah, it clashes and
Interesting.
and you feel that shame. But that shame it's nothing. It's bullshit.
It
you
is.
know,
It's
you
fucking
just gotta
bullshit.
let go of it. It's just like anything else, like the music industry, like what we're talking about. Like it's all just a game. And once you realize it, it's like the Matrix. Like once you realize you're in the Matrix, you're just like, oh man, I'm gonna take that red pill. Like not in a non-political way, because I've realized that that's like a political thing now. But
Yeah, it is.
yeah, you always take the pill that's like, well, now that I know and now that I'm aware, I'm gonna start choosing to do what I want and perceive things in the way that I want to perceive it, and not just follow someone else's rules.
Man, I gotta say, I love the way you perceive things because in many ways I've experienced similar things. Obviously, I'm not gonna say it's the same thing because it's vastly different between what a man and a woman experiences in the world. But coming from a very strict Christian background to then trying to grow up and break away from that, a lot of those, I'm not gonna say morals, but a lot of like those conditionings that you mentioned, it's fucking difficult. But what I'm curious about is you have done a lot of personal growth. You have confronted these bullshit things that you were told, like that you were told when you were a kid. You confronted them, you saw the lies, and then you kind of grew into who you are today, and you're succeeding. Is that, and I'm just being honest here, is that the key to actually changing the way things are done in the industry? Because I actually also agree with you. Something we said in the past in this conversation, how it's very hard to control people. It's almost nearly impossible to try and control an entire industry. So the best thing you can do is control yourself, and hopefully that helps someone else change. In my honest question, do you feel like that's the way to actually change this industry for the better? And I'm talking more specifically for women, is by having that personal growth, confronting a lot of that shame and just pushing past it? Or is there another way, in your opinion? And I
No,
know
I
this is
mean,
kind of a broad question. I'm just
no, no,
curious.
it's totally. I think it's a great question, and it's 100% everything you just said. You have to fight the demons inside before you can ever fight anything externally. You have to be able to sit with yourself and have those types of conversations, especially as a female. And it's not just a female in this industry, it's a female in this country.
Yeah.
It's a female in our society and what we've been told, what we can be, what we can't be, what we can do, what we can do, what we can't do, what we can say, what we can't say, and throwing all of that out of the window and realizing that, like, no, you need to trust your gut and do what's best for you. And my biggest thing with like activism and all of that is, you can work to help as many people as you want, but until you are the example of the change that you want to see, nothing will change.
Mm.
and
Yeah.
and if we have everyone, if all females are walking into, boardrooms with that same sort of energy, and we're all doing it and it's all just sort of matter of fact, like this is just how it is now, then I think we will see a change. But until then, it's going to be a very slow gradual change. But I do think that women in this country, just through, obviously like the Me Too movement, and um, despite like what people's opinions of that might be, in the sense of, women coming out, maybe calling out people, or things being untrue, and that whole thing sort of went, had an ugly turn at some point in time, and it's very negative now in people's minds. It's still very much a positive thing because it offered an opportunity for women to just open their mouths, and be able
Yeah.
to speak like a normal person and have people actually listen to them and pay attention. And so I think with movements like that, mixed with women individually taking control of their lives, I think that's when we'll see real change.
I love that. And I have to agree because it sounds like, I mean, I'm glad that these things are happening because it does give a platform for a conversation that, let's be honest, and again, I'm speaking as myself, but I'm willing to bet that most men in specific, people in general, are aware of a lot of this shit, but we just don't talk about it, right? And I think it's one of those things where combined with personal growth, I think that honestly is what's going to lead to massive amount of change. And I think someone like you who has put their foot down, who has just done it for herself, who's basically made choices to better herself, to just confront these things, but also be like, no, this is me and I'm going to be me regardless of whoever says anything. I think that speaks way louder than words, in my opinion. And I definitely have to commend you for that because I feel fired up just talking to you. And that speaks volumes, to be honest.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. That means a lot to me.
I had no idea this conversation was going to go here. Jesus. I hope.
Well, awesome. No, I mean, I didn't either. I
But
had no intention of it going in this direction.
neither did I.
Interviews are always the worst for me. I'm just like, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, I'm just like, tell me what to do with my hands. So, no, and this has been lovely. This has been a great conversation.
I appreciate you being open minded about it too. Like it's hard sometimes to open up. So I am very grateful that you are open to talk
Yeah,
about
you know
this.
what? I just stopped caring. I think that's another thing too. You just have to stop caring what anyone else thinks of you. And like we live in this society where everyone has this box that they get to stand on, called Facebook or Twitter or whatever, and they get to like vomit all of their pointless opinions out, into the world and feel special because they get to do that. But and it makes the rest of us feel like we have to be so scared, and walk eggshells around everyone because we're just so terrified of what other people think of us. But at the end of the day, you just have to not care because it's pointless. You can't make everyone happy. And even if you do the right thing, there's still going to be someone out there that says it's the wrong thing. So you just kind of have to do what you want to do and be honest and be open. And, and I find that so much more inspiring than people that are, sort of contrived or trying to make other people happy all the time.
Yeah. God, man, amazing advice. Normally, I ask you to give me advice like at the very end. That's a fucking great tidbit right there. That's the one I'm gonna use. Jesus, Luna, you are a fantastic artist, fantastic human being, and
Thank
I am
you.
delighted that I get the opportunity to explore your creativity and your mindset, even just for an hour. It's been an absolute pleasure. Before I let you go, I want you to just kind of let me know a little bit about what you've got on your plate. You've got some music. You've mentioned some of your projects. What are some of the things that your fans and people can expect to hear from you in the next coming months?
Yeah, I mean, I have this EP coming out on October 2nd. It's called Three Cheers for the American Beauty, and it's about exactly what we were discussing earlier, which is, ridding yourself of the conditions that were set for you when you were growing up and when you were a lot younger, and the things that make you feel shame, and just sort of like ridding yourself of that and being able to be vocal and be yourself. And it sort of just kind of came out in a rage way. but but I'm looking forward to people being able to like listen, like just being able to listen to it and hear themselves in the stories and be able to, take the things that they hear in the songs and, tackle their own lives with that sort of energy of like, don't fuck with me, basically. And then I also, this EP is going to extend beyond just the music. I have short stories that are attached to each of the songs. And each short story contains a female anti-hero, so to speak, that kind of tackles her own version of a societal pressure that gets put on young women in America.
Mm.
Um, so people can look forward to those kind of stories sort of bleeding out in like different ways, and possibly a book that will be attached to the EP as well. And that kind of stuff will come more so next year, but it's definitely something that fans can look forward to.
That's pretty cool. Are the stories going to be in the book, or where can they find the stories?
Yeah, so they're not actually full stories. They're just pieces of stories. So for example, there will be a a diary entry, and then there will be, a mass media article, and then like a police report, and all of these little things will kind of tie the story together over time. And fans will be able to sort of create the stories in their head and decide what that story looks like.
That's
And
cool.
then I'm hoping that, maybe if we can get a bunch of fans together to write what they think these stories should be and how they should end, then create that into a book and have that as something that fans can have.
I love that. That sounds like a fantastic package. And do you have any performances lined up? I imagine not, but do you have anything planned in the long term?
I do, yeah. So I'm gonna do an EP release, I guess, live session thing. I'm gonna be going to Phoenix and filming that, and I have Mo from 93.3 in Phoenix coming in. She's gonna be doing an interview with me. I'll be performing all of the songs live, um, via Instagram live, but also it'll be filmed, so it's something that I can post later on. And I'll be doing acoustic performances as well,
I
and
love
that'll
that.
be after October, right after the release. We should have everything.